What is up, maniacs? My name is Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Actually, I should change that to the Milly Maker Maniac. I am not making millions. I am consistently losing since week 2. DFS is stupid. Fantasy football is stupid. We shouldn't be doing this. It's so much fun, but god damn it, it is stupid. Tough week. Tough week. It's crazy how we put 30, 40 hours into this. And obviously, we are trying to predict a game that is pretty unpredictable based on humans running around at insane speeds with a whole bunch of chaos. Like, we don't know what the coaches are going to do. Like, we can do all the research we want to do, but we don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know where the injuries are going to happen. Actually, we do know where the injuries are going to happen. The injuries and the people that underperform are going to come from anybody that I have more than 30% roster share for. That's the secret. That's what we haven't been telling everybody is I do have the skeleton key, and it's just whatever I think is going to happen, go away from that because, god damn, I missed, and I missed hard this week. Tough week, lost $2,500. Probably going to have to start changing my stakes a little bit and probably won't be maxing out the Milly Maker next week. But all that being said, fantasy football's stupid, but it's also awesome. So let's dive into it. Let's figure out what in the hell went wrong and what could we have done to prevent it. Honestly, this week we weren't going to get to the Milly Maker lineup. This is the first week where really I feel like for the most part, like the player pool was there, but I really wasn't going to be able to build a lineup with how I saw it coming into the week that was going to take it down. Where I really missed, knowing Sean Tucker would have been nice. And there were signals. We talked about it in the player video, but Ty Wilds tried to tell us over here on my game-by-game breakdown. He told us, favorite sleeper, Sean Tucker right there. Might not have been right with Jamar Chase, but that's okay. We should have listened to Ty. We could have got to Sean. And the frustrating thing is I was in that backfield as one of my core plays with Rachaad White. I really thought that the Sean Tucker touches were a little bit skewed from the previous week and that it wasn't a signal for more work. And I was wrong. I was wrong there. But let's look at the rest of these core plays at running back that really destroyed me this week. Josh Jacobs goes out, and I can't remember if it was the first or second quarter. Manny Wilson ends up putting, I think, 15, somewhere in that ballpark as his backup, but Jacobs definitely would have scored 30 in that matchup. Very frustrating that we didn't get to see that through. I was about 50% Jacobs. I was 71% Dowdle. He didn't play great again this week, and the Falcons played much better than I anticipated. But even this one is a tough break. If you're watching the games, you saw that he was literally out of bounds by a hair, a literal hair. Like his cleat couldn't have been more than 2 millimeters on the line from taking away 7 points from us. That would have made his day usable and would have at least helped us cash more, would have saved me a few $100 for sure. But miss there. That was just an overall miss. There wasn't anything funky besides the closeness of this. And that's another thing as I'm like reflecting all this week. Like the difference between being a winning team in the NFL and a losing team in the NFL is just on a razor's edge. It is so close as the very same thing in fantasy. Like as I watched the games last week, so many of my predictions were correct, but they just missed. And what I mean by like that, a good example is the Vikings pass game. I'd like to thank Jonathan James McCarthy for being trash, but Jefferson and Addison were running wide ass open all game. Early in the game, Addison, on the telecast, they called it a drop, but it wasn't a great throw. It would have been, I think it was a 70-yard touchdown. Obviously, that would have been nice as we had about 35% Addison, but McCarthy just missed that throw. He also, the interception, they threw in the end zone to Addison. Addison was wide open. He just underthrew it. We get a good throw there. all of a sudden Addison has a 3-touchdown game and we look like absolute heroes, but that's not how it played out. It's really a game of inches. Like if he puts 2 feet more on the one in the end zone, that's a touchdown. If he takes literally 6 inches left to the left of the throw that Addison got his hands on across the middle of the field, that's another huge touchdown. It is just so close. And then like our other big stand in that range was Xavier Worthy. Mahomes missed a wide open, I think that one was 60 yards if I remember correctly, touchdown to Worthy. So like a lot of our calls are right there, but it all comes down to those big moments. Like, do they get that big catch or do they just miss? And this week, it was a week of us just missing. Obviously, here we look at it. Jaylen Warren, his backup, Kenneth Gainwell, once he goes out, scores 30. So the field was all over that one. It wasn't like we were going to sneak up on anybody, but that was one of our core plays and killed roughly 30% of our lineups with the ankle injury in the first quarter. DeMercado, we were all over that game, the game that ended up being what you needed for the Milly Maker. DeMercado goes out in the second quarter with an ankle injury, and he had 7 touches before that, so he's starting to – it looked like it was going to open up for him, and then he just goes out. So that one hurts. That was our big punt play. That was supposed to be our Sean Tucker. But it didn't play out that way. Like, we were all over the game that we had to have with Brissett, McCaffrey. I mean, we look at this game, McCaffrey, Michael Wilson, Trey McBride. That was like the nut stack that we needed, game stack. We could have thrown Brissett in there. We could have thrown Dortch in there. And when we look at the Milly Maker lineup that took it down, that's what it was, a triple stack with Brissett, with Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, and McCaffrey, and then the comeback of McBride, and then the comeback of McCaffrey. I also could have mixed in, from that same game, could have mixed in George Kittle. So we could have got a ton of people out of that game. And then we look at the other one that was frustrating. Josh Allen had the big game. In the player pool video, I just talked about how I didn't see the weapons around him for him to have like this upside game, but he is Josh Allen, so we're not going to completely fade it. He ended up being my QB4 as far as roster on the week. I had a lot of him naked, but it primarily didn't matter because the vast majority of those lineups that I had with Allen, I had Dowdle and Jacobs in those lineups, so those were dead, unfortunately. And, you know, I had a lot of Josh Allen and Rachaad White, just not Josh Allen and Sean Tucker. And then I did have a few lineups where I tried to tag on like the cheap piece once we found out that Coleman was out, which was an interesting wrinkle. I did not get to Tyrell Shavers. I did have a Gabe Davis lineup. I did have a Curtis Samuel lineup. But somehow I take those shots and I don't end up on the Shavers one. Like, that's so frustrating. Like, all over it. Like, I know I'm trying to make it sound like I was smarter than I was this week, but it's like I went through these thought processes and like saw game scenarios that could play out like this and tried to build lineups like it, but I just barely fucking missed. Just on that razor's edge where like I'm right there, but don't quite have it. Like, obviously Sean Tucker there were signals. Only 1% of the fields got there. So, yeah, I mean, like, it's not like we were missing a lot of what everybody else thought, but like we talked about it. It was in discussion. It just felt like at 5K, like if he was 4K, sure, I would have mixed him in a little bit. But at 5K, DeMercado just seemed like a more likely guy in that range to go off. Obviously, that is not how it played out. But it's just frustrating because it's like all over it, where like those were two of my favorite games of the week with the Bills and the Buccaneers. And then obviously by far my favorite game of the week was the Cardinals and the 49ers. And I had a McCaffrey, Kittle, Wilson, and McBride lineup with Brissett, but it doesn't do me any good because I had Dowdle in there, and then I had where is he? Down here. That's good when I have to keep digging. Where is he? There he is. Jordan Addison, way the hell down here. Had a lot of Jordan Addison as he should have had a 40-point game. Like, literally, it was there. Just figure it out, McCarthy. Frustrating. And we knew with McCarthy that was a risk going into it. We talked about how he didn't have touch, how he threw too many fastballs, didn't have much poise, kind of speeding the game up, and that continued to be the case again this week. But frustrating. And really, like, I tried to build some lineups that would have made sense. Like, I there were lineups that could have been built that were like into the 290s that would have taken down the Millie. I built one that was Josh Allen, Sean Tucker, Christian McCaffrey, Michael Wilson, Tyrone McMillan, Nico, Trey McBride, and Kittle with the Browns D. And then also I took out Collins actually, and I put in Shavers just to see what that would look like. But it would have left like $3K in salary, and that's just not realistic. But there were ways to get there, but with our player pool, I was just never going to get there. We talked about it last week, but the reality of the situation is, like, for the most part, our player pool has been there. Like, I wasn't on Tyrone McMillan at all. Like, Bryce Young, I just didn't see that happening. Good for him. Good for the Panthers. But really, I thought if they were going to win that game, it was through Dowdle. That's not how it played out. They made the adjustment that we talked about where they needed to throw the ball deeper with Bryce Young. And we talked about it. We just didn't take any action on it. But never saw an outcome like this. So I would be lying if I was going to get Tedero McMillan in any lineups because I just was a full fade on him this week. At 5,600, I just thought that Addison was a much better play, more likely to get to this 36 number. And if you watch the film, honestly, he should have had it. He also had a couple drops too, but whatever. But the point I wanted to get to there is what it comes down to is the guys that we take the big stands on have to hit. And this week, really, the only like big stand for me that hit was McBride. I think I was at 65% McBride when it was all said and done. So we were right there with that. Like, that was one that I wanted to try to force in every lineup. Brissett obviously was a nice hit. Purdy was in our core plays. Josh Allen ended up being in my core plays. Wasn't when we were in the core play videos. He was just outside of it. But I ended up Sunday morning making an adjustment and getting more of him. But just didn't pay off because we missed so hard at running back. Like, if Jacobs stays healthy, my day's a lot different. Same thing if Dowdle's foot just doesn't quite touch that line. If I can just change Rashad White's name to Sean Tucker, that would have been freaking dope. Jalen Warren doesn't get hurt. Like, I mean, that's just the reality of DFS. Like, if injuries happen or like the guys that were really heavy on miss and they miss really hard, there's just not much. Our likelihood of winning is very low. Like, we can have that one random lineup that hits, but if our core guys, like if Jacobs plays the whole game, my day is a lot different because I had tons of lineups with Jacobs but not Dowdle. Like, I would say probably more than half my lineups had, probably closer to 40% actually, had Jacobs and Dowdle in them. So obviously I needed both of them to hit. If they do, I have a massive day. And I think if we replay that slate, 100 times, that honestly more than 50% of the time, I think Jacobs has 30. Obviously, we can't control injuries. Same thing with Warren. That one hurts. So feels like we were still on it. It just was a bad run out for us. Receiver was tough this week. It really is. Like, the thing about receiver is when we talk about that razor's edge and how close everything is for being good or bad, that's kind of heightened at the receiver position because there's so many things that have to go right for them to have a big day. Like, there has to be failures in coverage. There has to be a game plan to get them the ball. The quarterback has to make good throws. Weather conditions can play into it. There's just so much that has to go right to pick these correctly. And so, like, that's why a receiver, we tend to have a bigger player pool and we try to play more off of the quarterback. Because when these guys have big days, lots of times it correlates to their quarterback having a good day. We hit on Nico. Really nobody hit in this range. Like, out of this group, JSN was the best, but the play, like we talked about, and how I try to play receivers, for the most part, I'm going to fade the top end range unless I'm bringing their quarterback with them, which is what I did with all these guys. So they didn't necessarily kill me, except for Jefferson. I actually mixed Jefferson in quite a bit. At his price point, it was easier to get to, but Puka wasn't a hit. Rice wasn't a hit. London was okay. Obviously, would have been nice to have London instead of Jefferson as much as we did. That would have changed the day. We talked about it in the player pool video as well. Like, we're just trying to pick the best guys out of each range, and we picked wrong here. Like, London was the better play over Jefferson. And I did end up mixing in London in a little bit. I was about even with the field on London. Like, Buka was a miss. Nico was solid. I didn't end up playing Zay that much. T was actually not bad out of that range. That range ended up being pretty bad. He scored 15, but he did get the touchdown. Addison, big miss. Pearsall didn't do anything. Jennings didn't do anything. But that one we weren't like super heavy on. We were, we mixed in. I wanted Pearsall, Jennings, and Kittle, and we mixed them on all pretty evenly. Obviously, Kittle was the one you needed. Worthy, we missed hard. Wilson was the guy you had. I was ended up being below the field on. I was very surprised at his ownership. We go over here. 23%. I think if I remember right, it was at 18% on Wilson. So a little bit below that. That's pretty heavy for a guy in that price range. But yeah, wide receiver was just tough this week. Talked about Watson a lot. I got scared away, and he was in that range where I needed him to be. Like, I needed somebody in that 4,400 range for so many of my lineups. And what I ended up doing on a lot of these, I punted down to Michael Wilson on a lot of them, but I didn't want too many McBride and Wilson lineups. I kind of felt like it was, if Wilson had a big day, that McBride probably didn't hit his ceiling. That obviously didn't play out. I did have, a decent amount of them together, but my thought is that if Wilson went really off, that McBride would have more of like a 15-point game, and at his price, that wouldn't have paid off. So I didn't think it correlated well to have those guys in the same lineup too much. Obviously, I was wrong on that. Yeah, just a frustrating week. But again, like, we can see the philosophy of attacking the games, how well that would have worked or did work this week. I didn't get much McCaffrey. I built him into the game stacks, but outside of that, I didn't really play him. And the thing is, too, like, if Warren plays the whole game, like, McCaffrey and Robinson at their price wouldn't have been the best plays compared to Warren. And I also think the same thing for Jacobs. If Jacobs would have been able to finish the game, I think he finishes in this range, and then it would have been Warren and Jacobs that were the better play, and we would have had that combination quite a bit. But shoulda, coulda, woulda. That's not how it played out. I think the philosophy is correct. 2 of our core defenses hit the top. We did miss pretty hard if you watch the video on Lamar. And we talked about the possibilities of Lamar missing. But I talked about, like, if we have 10% of our lineups that are wasted by Lamar, I'm okay with that. If we get a huge edge on the field, it's just an MVP candidate like that. You never want to just not play him because it's a bad matchup, because he can't put up 40 against anybody. I mean, we saw that with Josh Allen this week in what isn't a great matchup, but he made it a great matchup. Lamar did not have that success, but I talked about in that video, like, in the lineups we're not playing Lamar, we're definitely going to be mixing in the Browns D. They ended up being my highest roster defense again, and that played out nicely. The Steelers were my 4th highest roster defense, so we were there on defense. Really what killed us was running back. If we missed that running back real hard, philosophy was right on a lot of them. It just didn't happen because of the injuries. Wide receiver was a tough week to guess wide receiver. We did miss. Like, I can't act like I was close on it. Missed hard on the D-Hop call as well. That sucked. Was pretty close on Jaden Higgins. If you watch that too, he just missed reaching the ball over the pylon for a touchdown. He had a solid, I think he ended up with 11 points. Let's see where Higgins is at. Different Higgins. He had 9 points. If he got in the end zone, it would have been a solid punt play. But again, that's not how it played out. Bummer of a week. Let's go ahead and look at my best lineup, and we can laugh at my worst lineup too. But here we have it. Brissett with Wilson and McBride. The comeback in that one was McCaffrey and Jennings. Obviously, Jennings was not the right comeback. Could have mixed in, would have much rather found a way to get Kittle in this lineup. Obviously, Warren is a miss. It's unfortunate, though, because if it wasn't for the injury, that wouldn't have been a miss. Addison, we talked about, easily could have been a 40-point game. Should have been a 40-point game, but fucking Jonathan James, great effort out there. McCarthy. And then, Dowdle. Foot was just barely on the line. That would have helped us, at least would have got us close to the 200 mark, but it was not meant to be this week. It was just not my week. Pretty early on, it felt like, damn, this isn't going to be it. It's rough when you have this many lineups in the 60s. Damn, it was a tough week. Here's my core stack of the week, or my core starting players to build my lineup. Jacobs and Dowdle for 19 points. That's sick. So good. 30% receiver, 5.5 points. Awesome. Great choice. Wasn't that high on Chase, actually. I mean, I had 12-ish% Chase, and they were all with Flacco, so those missed hard. Yosevas was fun. That was a fun little mix in for 5 points. Ooh, Freiermuth was another big miss. Scores 31 against the Bengals the first time around. Scores 3 this time. I had 30% of that, 2.9. Pretty dope, pretty dope, pretty dope. Rashad White, you're not Sean. You're not Sean Tucker. You're not Sean Tucker. 8.2. I think I would have, if we go back, I don't know. I'm not an expert or anything, but I think it would have been better if we would have chose his teammate. Because 37, if I checked my math correctly, is more than 8.2. Tough day. Let's look at some of these other duds. There we go. Lamar, core stack. Jacobs, Dowdle. What a week. What a week. But look at that. Look at the leverage I got on the field. 0.6%. How about I ended up with 16% Hopkins for 2.1 points? That's why we do it. That's why we put in 40 hours of research every week. This is brilliant, my friends. Brilliant. God, I need a better hobby. Like, if I put the effort that I put into fantasy football into something like literally if I put this into my real jobs, I would have made $1 million by this point in the fantasy season. Does that mean I'm giving up? No, I'm a slow learner, and I'm not giving up. We're going to win the goddamn Milly. If it costs us $1 million to do it, we're going to fucking do it. All right, I think that's enough ranting. Actually, let's look at one more. Look at this core stack. Look at that. Jacobs, Dowdle, Chase, strong Chase. I said primarily Flacco, but I did do some game stacks with Rodgers and Chase. Ooh, Addison, not 40. Thank you, Jonathan James McCarthy, for sucking. This is my fun, my one Calvin Austin lineup. That was fun. 1.5. Thanks for that. Smooth. 2.9. Sick. We didn't miss here, though. Our boy T. Higgins, 15. Huge. Huge. That's why we got 30% Higgins for outcomes like that. And I love the Chargers. They actually were my favorite defense of the week. I literally said we play defense against the Jaguars because I think they're bad. Turns out, I thought wrong. Don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Anyways, my friends, all that being said, I'm real optimistic about week 12. I'm going to take a couple days, reset, then we're going to dive right back in. And then I'm going to give you the guys that I'm going to spend or have 30% more of. And what I want you to do, I want you to watch this video and I want you to remember this. Fade those guys. When I tell you to play Josh Jacobs, don't do it. If you like money, don't do what I tell you. I am wrong. I'm wrong a lot. If I tell you to play Rico Dowdle at 71%, fade him. Fade him because his foot will be on the line. He will not score. And in 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1s, Canales randomly will start throwing the ball deep, which is actually kind of sick. Good job, Canales. But damn it. All right, rant over. Hope you guys enjoyed Listen to me bitch all game, all episode. We will turn it around in week 12. We will get some momentum going. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I hope you guys had a better week than I did in week 11, but we will have a bigger week in week 12. Have a wonderful day, my friends. We will see you on Wednesday for the game by game breakdown. Thanks and have a great day.